In a world of shimmering stars and vast galaxies, Lyra, the alien princess, felt small and insignificant. Born into the noble family of the Gorthan Empire, her life was meant to be one of power, prestige, and admiration. But instead of being adored, Lyra was always overlooked. She wasn't like the other alien princesses who towered over men, their stature commanding attention. Lyra was smaller, more delicate, her silver hair flowing like a cascade of moonlight. Her bright violet eyes held the wisdom of her people, but there was something vulnerable about her, something that made the alien males of her species turn away with disinterest. It wasn't just her physical appearance that made her feel rejected. It was the way her presence was often ignored. As a young princess, she had been raised with the expectation that an alien male would soon claim her as his own, bringing her the love and respect that came with her royal blood. But instead of the affectionate glances and sweet words that she had expected, she only received cold stares. Her people, the Gorthans, were a race of tall, muscular beings who valued strength above all else. To them, Lyra's small stature and gentle nature made her an oddity, something unworthy of attention. The first time it happened, she was only 16 years old, standing at the Grand Royal Ball, surrounded by hundreds of dignitaries and powerful alien lords. Lyra had always believed that this would be the night her future would change, when an alien prince would sweep her off her feet and they would rule together in perfect harmony. She had heard the whispers in the corridors, the stories of other princesses who were admired by the strongest of their kind. But when Lyra caught the eye of one of the most powerful alien lords, her heart skipped a beat, until he looked away without even acknowledging her presence. Lyra's heart sank as she watched the lords and ladies around her whisper to one another, their eyes never meeting hers. She was beautiful in her own way, but in the world of the Gorthans, beauty wasn't enough. Strength, power, and influence were what truly mattered, and Lyra had none of those. She was merely a fragile creature in a world that demanded resilience. Months passed, and still, no male sought her hand. Her family, particularly her father, King Roan, began to grow concerned. They spoke of alliances with neighboring alien races, but every time they introduced her to potential suitors, Lyra found herself shying away. The alien males who were considered her equals treated her with indifference, their eyes always focused on her sisters, taller and more imposing. She had heard the quiet murmurings among the palace staff, the rumors that Lyra's beauty would never be enough to overcome her weakness. She was the runt of the royal family, someone who was meant to fade into the background. One day, after another failed attempt at matchmaking, Lyra found herself walking alone in the alien marketplace of Kaldos Prime. It was a bustling, vibrant place where species from all over the universe gathered to trade goods, but to Lyra, it felt like a labyrinth of disappointment. She wandered among the stalls, hoping for some distraction from her thoughts. The sounds of merchants shouting their wares, the flickering lights, and the strange, intoxicating smells of alien fruits filled the air, but it all felt hollow. Lyra could feel the weight of her loneliness pressing down on her, each step feeling heavier than the last. She stopped by a stall, her eyes catching the sight of a small, delicate piece of jewelry, a pendant crafted from a rare mineral found only on her home planet. It was a beautiful piece, one she had never seen before. She reached out to touch it, admiring the way the pendant caught the light, when she suddenly felt a presence beside her. Looking up, she met the gaze of a human male, something she had not expected to see in the Gorthan marketplace. He was taller than most men, his brown hair falling in waves around his face, and his eyes were a warm brown that held a kindness Lyra had never known. He wasn't imposing, like the alien males she had known all her life, but there was something about him that made her feel seen. Something about the way his gaze lingered on her that made her heart beat faster. For a moment, their eyes locked, and Lyra felt a spark of something unfamiliar. No one had ever looked at her like this. No one had ever made her feel like she mattered. The human's gaze was not filled with judgment or disinterest. Instead, it was warm, genuine, and curious. He didn't see her as the fragile alien princess she had always been, the one who had been cast aside by her own people. But before she could speak, the moment was broken. The human turned away, leaving Lyra standing there, her heart racing. She blinked, unsure if it had all been a dream. As she stood alone in the marketplace, Lyra couldn't help but wonder, what was it about this human that made her feel different? And more importantly, why did she feel a connection to him when all the alien males she had known had rejected her? After the brief encounter in the marketplace, Lyra could not shake the feeling of the human's gaze. His warm brown eyes, filled with something she couldn't quite understand, lingered in her mind. She had always known that alien males were indifferent to her, but this human, he had seen her, truly seen her, in a way no one else had. It was unsettling, yet strangely comforting. She had spent her whole life surrounded by coldness, surrounded by creatures who saw her as nothing more than a symbol of power. But this human, he had seen her as something more. The next day, Lyra found herself walking back to the same marketplace. She wasn't sure why. Perhaps it was simply a chance to revisit the feeling of that brief connection she had felt, or perhaps it was something deeper. But as she wandered through the market once more, her eyes scanned the crowd, hoping to see the human again. She told herself it was just curiosity, nothing more. After all, he was a human, an outsider, someone who didn't belong here. But still, something deep inside her urged her to look for him. And then there he was. He stood by a stall, his back to her, examining a display of exotic fruits. She could see his face now, more clearly than before. He looked so different from the aliens in the marketplace. His features were sharp, but there was a softness to him that made him stand out. Lyra hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to do. She had never approached anyone like this before, especially not someone who was not from her world. But the thought of simply walking away, of leaving this connection unexplored, seemed unbearable. So, without thinking, she stepped closer, her heart pounding in her chest. As if sensing her approach, the human turned, and their eyes met once again. This time, there was no hesitation in his gaze, no coldness or indifference. Instead, there was warmth, curiosity, and something else. Something that made Lyra's pulse quicken. "You," he said, his voice warm and deep. "You're the princess, aren't you?" Lyra blinked in surprise. She had been expecting him to say something less personal, something more neutral. But instead, he had called her by her title. It was strange, hearing it from him. Someone who wasn't part of her world, but there was no mockery in his voice. No awe or fear, either. Just an acknowledgement, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Yes," Lyra replied softly, unsure of what to say next. "I am Princess Lyra." The human's lips curved into a small smile, and for a moment, the world around them seemed to fade away. It was just the two of them, standing in the middle of a busy marketplace. Yet it felt as if time had slowed. There was something undeniably magnetic about him. The way he spoke to her, not as a princess, not as royalty, but simply as a person, was refreshing. It made her feel, for the first time in her life, that maybe she wasn't just a title. Maybe she was more than her family's expectations, more than the royal blood that ran through her veins. "I'm Ethan," he said after a moment, still smiling. "I didn't expect to see you here. I mean, I know you're royalty and all, but I didn't think you'd be in a place like this." Lyra found herself smiling, a soft, genuine smile that she hadn't shown to anyone in a long time. "I suppose I'm not like most royals," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "I prefer the simplicity of the market over the grand halls of the palace." Ethan's eyes softened. "I can understand that. Sometimes it's nice to escape all the expectations and just be yourself." Lyra nodded, her heart swelling with emotion. For the first time, someone had understood her. Someone who wasn't bound by the rules of her world. Someone who didn't see her as a princess to be admired or respected, but as a person. The conversation flowed easily between them, as if they had known each other for years. Ethan told her about his life, how he had traveled from Earth, how he had witnessed wars and loss, But through it all, he had always believed in the power of connection and love. It was something Lyra had never heard from the alien males, who always spoke of strength and power, of politics and strategy. Ethan spoke of the heart, of emotions, of kindness, and Lyra felt her walls begin to crumble. As they spoke, Lyra realized that she had never been able to open up like this to anyone before. She had always been surrounded by people who saw her as a tool of political power, someone to marry for the good of the empire. No one had ever taken the time to ask about her dreams, her fears, her desires. But here, with Ethan, she felt seen in a way she never had before. The crowd around them continued to bustle, but Lyra felt as if she and Ethan were in their own little world. The more they spoke, the more she realized that this connection, this feeling, was something she couldn't ignore. She wasn't sure if it was love, but it was certainly something powerful, something real. "Ethan," she said quietly, "why are you so kind to me? No one else has ever treated me like this." Ethan paused, his expression serious now. "Because I see you, Lyra," he said, "not just a princess, but a person. And I believe that the heart is stronger than any title or bloodline." His words struck a chord deep within her. She had always known she was more than her title, but hearing it from Ethan made it feel real. For the first time in her life, Lyra felt truly seen. And for the first time, she began to wonder if there was more to life than the expectations of her people. Could love, true love, be found in the most unexpected of places? Could a human, someone so different from her own kind, be the one to finally give her the love she had longed for? As the day wore on, Lyra and Ethan continued to talk, and Lyra realized that this connection was something she couldn't let go of. She was no longer the alien princess who was rejected by her own kind. She was a woman, a person capable of love. And for the first time, she felt hopeful about the future. As Lyra spent more time with Ethan, her world, once filled with formality and duty, began to change. She found herself thinking about him constantly, her heart swelling with each memory of their conversations. With every passing moment, her connection to him deepened, and yet the reality of her position as an alien princess hung over her like a dark cloud. She had always known that her people valued strength above all else, and now that she had finally found someone who treated her as an equal, someone who saw her for who she truly was, she couldn't help but feel torn. The rejection from her own kind was something she had grown accustomed to, but she hadn't anticipated that it would come with such an emotional cost. One evening, as Lyra stood on the balcony of her palace, gazing out at the stars, her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps approaching. She turned to see her father, King Roan, walking toward her with a stern look on his face. He had always been a man of few words, and when he spoke, his words were often laden with authority. But today, his expression was clouded with something more: disappointment. "Lyra," he said, his voice deep and commanding, "I need to speak with you." Lyra's heart skipped a beat. She knew what this conversation would be about. It had been days since she had last seen Ethan, and in that time, her people had begun to notice her strange behavior. Her conversations had become less focused on royal matters, and more about a human, a creature not even from their galaxy. The whispers among the palace staff had grown louder, and Lyra could no longer ignore the inevitable. She had to face her father, and soon, she would have to face the truth about where her heart truly lay. "What is it, father?" Lyra asked, trying to keep the tremor from her voice. King Roan stood tall, his regal form casting a shadow in the dim light of the evening. He looked at her with eyes that were filled not just with authority but with concern. "I have heard troubling things about your behavior. You have been spending too much time with that human. Ethan, is it?" His voice held a sharpness that Lyra hadn't expected, and it stung more than she had anticipated. Lyra's gaze faltered, and for a moment, she felt a pang of guilt. She had never wanted to disappoint her father, but her feelings for Ethan were undeniable. She had never felt so understood, so truly seen, and now her world seemed to be spinning out of control. I, I don't understand, Father, she stammered. What's wrong with spending time with him? He doesn't judge me like the others. He doesn't care about my title, my bloodline. King Roan's expression hardened. He is a human, Lyra, a creature of no importance. You are the princess of the Gorthan Empire, and your duties are to your people, not to a mere human. What you are doing is disgraceful, and it threatens the stability of our kingdom. Lyra felt a wave of frustration wash over her. Why does it matter so much, Father? I am still the same person, no matter who I spend time with. Why should it matter that he is human? Her father took a deep breath, his eyes never leaving hers. Because your duty is to marry within your own kind, to secure alliances that will strengthen our empire. We are not like the humans. We are a race of power, of warriors. Our bloodline demands respect. If you continue this foolishness, you risk everything. Lyra's heart clenched, and for the first time in her life, she felt the weight of her title pressing down on her. It wasn't just the weight of her responsibilities. It was the weight of expectations that she could never escape. She had spent her life fulfilling those expectations, but now, standing before her father, she realized that the one thing she truly wanted was something she could never have. The love and understanding she found in Ethan's eyes, the warmth that had healed her broken heart, was not something her people would ever accept. I don't want to marry a prince, Father. I don't want to be a symbol of power. I want to live my life as I choose, not as others tell me. Lyra said, her voice trembling with emotion. I want to be free. King Roan's expression softened for a moment, but his words remained firm. You may want freedom, Lyra, but you cannot have it. Not as long as you wear that crown. You were born to serve your people, to be a symbol of our strength. You cannot defy your destiny. Lyra felt her world shatter. She had always known that her life would not be her own, that the expectations placed upon her were too great to ever ignore. But to hear her father speak those words so plainly, it made her feel more trapped than ever. She had always been a princess, but now, standing in the face of this rejection, she felt like a prisoner. I can't do this anymore. Father, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I can't live a life where I am expected to be someone I'm not. King Roan's gaze hardened once more. Then you are no longer a princess of the Gorthan Empire. You are nothing. The words hit Lyra like a physical blow. She had always known that her heart and her duty were at odds, but now, with her father's harsh rejection, she realized just how deep the divide truly was. She had always been torn between her royal obligations and her desire for love, but now it seemed as if she had to choose, her people or her heart. As Lyra walked away from her father, her heart heavy with the weight of his words, she realized that the rejection she feared had finally come. But it wasn't from the alien males who had always ignored her. It was from her own kind, from the people she had been born to lead. And now, with the love she felt for Ethan standing in stark contrast to the life she had been born into, Lyra knew she would have to make a decision that would change everything. Lyra stood at the edge of the palace balcony, gazing out at the sprawling city below. The stars twinkled above, and for a moment, it felt as though the universe was offering her a sense of peace, something she desperately needed. But the peace was fleeting. The harsh words of her father still echoed in her mind, their sting unrelenting. You are nothing. She clenched her fists, feeling the weight of those words pressing down on her chest. She had been raised to serve, to lead, to live a life that was not her own. Yet, as she looked out into the horizon, she realized that she could not live a life of regret, trapped in a world that demanded so much of her and gave so little in return. Lyra's mind kept returning to Ethan, the human who had shown her kindness when no one else would. His warmth, his understanding, had opened her eyes to what was possible beyond her royal responsibilities. He had made her feel seen, something no one in her world had ever done. He had treated her as a person, not a princess, and for the first time, Lyra felt as though she mattered for who she truly was, not just the title she bore. But her duty to her people, her family, had always been her priority. She had never considered abandoning her position as princess, never dared to imagine a life outside of the palace. The very idea seemed impossible. Yet, in the silence of her room, with only the moonlight to guide her thoughts, Lyra knew that she had reached a crossroads. The path ahead was clear, but the decision was anything but easy. The thought of leaving everything behind, the palace, her family, her royal duties, filled her with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. She had spent her entire life as a symbol of power and strength, yet she had never felt weaker than in that moment. What if I fail? What if I make the wrong choice? These questions spiraled through her mind, but deep down, Lyra knew that to follow her heart would require more courage than any battle she had ever fought. It wasn't about strength in the traditional sense. It was about finding the strength to be herself, to make a choice that would ultimately define her future. As she stood there, contemplating her future, the door to her room creaked open. Lyra turned around, startled to see her mother, Queen Alina, standing in the doorway. Her mother's eyes were filled with concern, but also something else, something deeper. Queen Alina had always been a source of strength for Lyra, yet she had never been one to openly express her emotions. Seeing her now, standing in the doorway with a quiet understanding in her gaze, made Lyra's heart ache. "Mother," Lyra whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "What should I do? I can't stay here. I can't live a life where I am not free. But if I leave, if I follow my heart, I'll be abandoning everything." Queen Alina stepped into the room, her footsteps soft and deliberate. She walked toward her daughter, her hands trembling ever so slightly as she placed them on Lyra's shoulders. The queen's voice was calm, but her words carried a weight of wisdom that only a mother could offer. "Lyra, I see the struggle in your eyes. I have always known that you were never meant to be a pawn in the game of politics. You have a heart that is too large, too full of love, to be bound by the expectations of others." Lyra looked up at her mother, her heart swelling with conflicting emotions. "But mother, what about the empire? What about the people? If I leave, everything will fall apart. The Gorthons will lose their stability, and my father's legacy will be destroyed." Queen Alina smiled softly, her eyes filled with both sadness and pride. "The empire is important, yes, but the people will only thrive when their leaders follow their hearts, when they act with integrity and love, not out of obligation or fear. Your father has always been bound by duty, but you, my dear, you have the chance to choose a different path. A path that will honor both your love for Ithan and your love for your people." Lyra shook her head, her heart heavy with indecision. "But I don't know if I can do it. I don't know if I can make the right choice." Her mother's grip tightened ever so slightly, her voice gentle but firm. "You already know the answer, Lyra. The right choice isn't always the easiest one, but it is the one that will make you whole. You cannot spend your life pretending to be someone you are not. You are not just a princess, Lyra. You are a person with dreams, with desires, with a heart that longs for something more than what has been given to you." The words hung in the air, and in that moment, Lyra knew that her mother was right. She had spent too long hiding behind her title, living a life that had been chosen for her. But now she had the power to choose her own destiny, to take a leap into the unknown, to embrace a future that was built on love, not obligation. "I have to go," Lyra whispered, more to herself than to her mother. "I have to be with him. I can't keep running from who I am." Queen Alina nodded, her expression a mixture of sorrow and understanding. "Then go, my daughter. Live your truth, and never forget that no matter where life takes you, you will always have my love and my blessing." As Lyra walked toward the door, ready to leave behind everything she had ever known, she felt a sense of freedom wash over her. The weight of her father's rejection, the burden of her royal title, none of it mattered anymore. She was no longer defined by the expectations of others. She was defined by her own heart, her own choices, and as she stepped into the unknown, she knew that she had made the right decision. Lyra's heart was filled with hope as she took her first steps toward a life with Ithan, a life where love was her guiding star. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for sure: she was finally free.